I believe so. Yes, I'm Jim. You're sitting
I guess that's supposed to get things started.
Okay.
So, I will attempt to do that. First of all, you already heard the announcement about where the facilities are. There's still refreshments. And then, please don't ignore this side of the room. There's a lot of stuff over here that we'd like you to see. Sign-up sheets, other opportunities, petitions. A lot of good stuff on this side of the room, so make sure you get over there sometime tonight. I don't know that we have all our speakers here yet, but we're going to get started in the interest of time. I guess I'm leading it off, and I'm Bruce Merchant. I'm with, I was with the city of Kalamazoo. I guess I still am, kind of, sort of. Yeah. I'm still working on this project on behalf of the city, so, but I got rid of the tie, which is, that's how I know I'm retired, I guess. I wanted to do a brief update on a couple things. First of all, and I think most everybody's aware of the meeting we had with the EPA, and we gave them an update on that, and generally that was productive. I think that's the way we landed on. A lot of details still to work out. A week ago today, I was able to be in Washington, D.C. with Mayor Hopewell, and that was a very positive experience, other than it was 90 degrees and about 90% humidity, as only Washington could be. We were able to meet with each one of our elected representatives. We met with Senator Levin first, and had a very good discussion, especially with his staffer Alice, who was very active on environmental issues. We then met with Fred Upton and numerous staff in his office, notably Chief Counsel David McCarthy, I think his name is. And he was very helpful from a perspective on liability, because one of the things that happens with Superfund site is EPA likes to assign liability, especially to responsible parties. And of course, in the Allied site case, that responsible party declared bankruptcy, and we know that story. But if somebody assumes ownership of that site, i.e. the city, you got to have some capacity to deal with liability issues. And so we had quite a discussion about that. That's an issue to work through. I don't see that as huge, but it is an issue we've got to talk with our attorneys about. The city has hired Dykema, and that's kind of the top of the list, is how we deal with that. The other issue we talked a lot about was whether we could get a partnership with either between EQ and EPA, or EQ and the city, on a single or a sole source purchase type arrangement. In other words, we got the price, why sit here and try to get other prices? Why not just go with a sole source? That's very difficult for the EPA to do, but not impossible. It's been done on other projects, from what I understand. But as most cases, the devil's in the details on that. And so, Mick Warner's here. We had a chance to talk quite a bit this afternoon about a number of these issues, and we're working on those. And there's a lot still to be discussed about that. And how do we move forward on that? And I'm not going to steal Gary's thunder too much, but we do need to talk a little bit. One of the ongoing issues is money, is the funding. I think we all know the bankruptcy's got $50 million over here, and then we got a $70 or $80 million problem, depending on how you add all the numbers up, $70 million plus or minus. And that's nothing to sneeze at. That's a lot of money. That's more than what's in the bank, so to speak. But there's issues that we discussed in Washington on that as well. First of all, the Allied site's considered an area of concern, and that's a designation that I think there's 37 in the country and 14 of them are in the Great Lakes. So that tells you a little bit about some of the issues in the Great Lakes. But because the Allied site's part of an area of concern, there's money set aside for AOCs. And we think there's some money available. We also think that some ongoing annual funding from the EPA could also be a good opportunity there. The exciting thing about received. I think the one thing that I was impressed with was how well educated all the staffers were in DC. They'd done their homework, they knew what our issue was, and thanks to the regional and local representatives, I think fed them a lot of good information too, which is appreciated. Most of all, they knew that there was a lot of public support, and each one of them noted that, and each one of them said, in some way, shape, or form, the same statement. They were 100% behind us. What could they do to get total renewal? So that's great news, and yet there's still a lot of work to do. And that's kind of what I think some of the tonight's about, is some future strategizing, and community support is still very critical to how we move forward. So that's kind of where we're at in a real brief nutshell. I'm going to be drafting a letter to our elected representatives for the staffers to look at, to see some specific asks of EPA we can make at this point regarding several of these issues I talked about. And that's going to help because for some reason there's a differential response on EPA when we get a letter from a representative or a senator. So, and that's a good thing. So we'll be doing question and answers later, I believe. So I'll turn it over to Gary now.
Thanks, Bruce. Definitely have plenty of volume here. Can you hear me out there? Well, how about that?
We're gonna hear it.
Yeah, we need to turn it down a little bit. All right, again, I'm Jerry Wager. I'm the Executive Director of the Kalamazoo River Cleanup Coalition. Our group was formed in 2007. I see plenty of familiar faces out here from back then. You'll recall that in March of 2007, the EPA had a press conference in Plainwell and said that they were going to remove PCB-contaminated sediments from the river. But if you read down to like paragraph 6, it was their plan to bring the PCB spoils to the Allied site. So, still more?
No, stand up.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were going to talk louder.
Yes, sure.
Okay, sorry. And you know, my wife never says that for some reason. Anyway, so we were successful back then in 2007. With your help, many of you in the audience here tonight, we were able to convince the EPA of the error of their ways, and they went back to responsible parties and got a couple more $1 million and took the material to approved landfills rather than bringing it here to the Allied site. Earlier, they had said that the pile that they created when they cleaned up the contamination from the Bragg Mill Pond was a temporary solution. And of course, the city government at the time, which many of our current city commissioners were on even back then in 1999, they were told that a temporary solution was the pile. So in their minds, temporary meant that, well, we're doing this right now, consolidating material, and when we get it together, we'll take this material where it belongs, a landfill somewhere. Well, actually, it turns out that temporary just meant they weren't finished filling it yet. So in 2007, that was the plan, to finish filling it with an additional 123,000 cubic yards to add to the already 1.5 million cubic yards that we currently have at the Allied site. And then put a plastic cover over it and call it good. We call it the kitty litter option. You know, you do your business in the sand, kick some sand on top, and walk away. We've decided that the kitty litter option is not good enough. Here in 2013, the EPA says that, yep, it's the kitty litter option, and we're going to consolidate some of the material from around the periphery on the east side of Portage Creek, from the parking lot where many of us were at the rally the other day, all along Portage Creek, by Heritage Community, Senior Community, some of the properties right along there. Consolidate the PCB-contaminated sediments from that area and add to the pile once again, so that Mount PCB grows 20 feet taller and has about 2.2 million cubic yards of PCBs. In terms of operating the facility, this toxic waste facility that they would be creating, they plan on sending a check for $3 million to Lansing. What could go wrong? When you asked them how long this facility would be there, they said, well, in perpetuity. And as far as I know, in perpetuity, I thought it meant forever. So that $3 million is going to last forever in Lansing? Are you kidding me? So the other problem with in perpetuity is actually that $3 million in the eyes of the EPA is to handle the operating and maintenance expenses for the allied waste dump that they want to create for the next 30 years. So what happens in year 31? Well, the EPA doesn't think that far ahead, apparently. As far as I'm concerned, in perpetuity, actually, it turns out to be a legal term. Right, Blair? Counselor? In perpetuity means really for the lifetime of a given asset class. So, for instance, a waste facility has a lifespan in the EPA's eyes of in perpetuity and or 30 years, whichever comes first. So at the end of 30 years, we'd be right back here again. If the material stays there, whether you line it, whether you slice it, whether you dice it, whether you cover it up with plastic, or whatever you do, PCBs have a long enough half-life that they're going to last a heck of a lot longer than 30 years. They're still going to be here when our grandchildren meet here at St. Joe, because you know St. Joe will still be here then. All right, Lord. So we need to take care of this now. And as far as I can see, the only thing that might be holding us up is money. Right? As Bruce mentioned, there's $50 million in a trust fund because one of the responsible parties, Millennium Holdings, was the company that actually owned the Allied Site. The company that owned them, I hate to use the term, they didn't go bankrupt. They were reorganized under Chapter 11, which is protection from their creditors, which is you, as the people of the United States. You were a creditor because of the damage that was done to the Allied site. So the bankruptcy court judge in New York gave a settlement, charged them $103 million. $50 million earmarked for the Allied site, $50 million earmarked for the rest of the Superfund site, because after all, we're talking about the Allied Paper, Inc. / Portage Creek / Kalamazoo River Superfund site. 80-mile stretch of the river. Okay, so that $50 million was designated for the rest of the claim. And about $3 million for natural resource restoration. They're going to do some projects along Portage Creek with that money, including removing the Alcott Street Dam. So back to the cost of our current project. According to the 2010 census, there's just a little over 250,000 people in Kalamazoo County. So the EQ bid for the work is $120 million. So that means every man, woman, and child in Kalamazoo County would be paying $480. But there is the $50 million in the trust fund, so there's really a $70 million funding gap. $70 million. You know, pretty soon we're going to be talking serious money, right? $70 million, do that same math, and now each man, woman, and child would pay $280 to fund the cleanup. So a family of four would be paying $1,120. All right, because of the four people, right, in the family. So if the cleanup were to take 5 years, let's see my math here. If the cleanup were to take 5 years, that means that that family of four would have to pay $224 per year, which breaks down to $18.66 per month. So to find that money, the money we need, the $70 million, we, in a family of four, would pay $18.66 $2,018.66 per month over a 5-year period. So, how many people in this room think that a government that prints money every day just found $52 billion for Hurricane Sandy relief? How many people believe they can't find less than $20 a month for the next 5 years to fund the PCD cleanup? Right, that's what I thought. All right, so one last thing. I'm getting a hook here from Meredith. So I mentioned that bankruptcy or the reorganization of Lyondell, the year they declared Chapter 11 protection from their creditors, their gross worldwide sales was $52 billion. So what I'm hoping it will do is understand that there is no lack of money. The government prints it every day. What we need is a political will to help our government find $70 million, give or take, to do the cleanup. That's the money we need. So I'm saying that our people, our neighborhoods, our city, and our future need a cleanup, not a cover-up. Thank you. Thank you. Next is Dick DeVisser. He's president of the Homecrest Circle Association and a longtime resident, maybe a day or two, over there by the Allied site.
As you can see, I had a lot of time to prepare for this. Well, I appreciate all of you coming. As a resident of Homecrest Circle neighborhood, which is really a subset of Millwood, we have been engaged in one way or another with this battle for about 40 years. It started out, of course, as paper mill waste sludge pits, which, as the cellulose fiber rotted, stank terribly. And that was characteristic of Millwood for many years. But it was the smell of jobs, and we were tolerant of that. But as the paper mills went away, we were hoping that this property could be brought back to some useful purpose. And that's really what this whole movement is about. The EPA is making noises as if they are going to resign this 90 acres to a perpetual receptacle for this PCB-laden material. And I think the city's position on this is really right spot on. First, this EPA settlement, or proposed settlement of the site, does nothing to protect our drinking water supply, which is sourced from aquifers directly under the pile. The second point is that it does nothing to promote future development of the site. When we say future development of the site, we are talking green space, we are talking a trail, we are talking light industrial, some commercial. I've seen the long-range plans for the area, and we're even talking some high-end condominiums, that sort of thing. The thing we need to think about, as desirable as green space is, we are also talking about bringing some part of the 90 acres back into the tax base of the city. This city has benefited greatly from the colleges, the junior colleges, and other nonprofits taking up a large part of the property in the city. But one of the negative sides of that is that your tax base goes away. We need taxable real estate in this city, and this is 90 acres that at at least part of it could be part of the solution to that. So the city is saying, we need to develop this. This ought not be forever a lost parcel of ground. And then the third position of the city, the third point, is that the proposal for the EPA does nothing to set up a plan for who's going to own this when it's all over with, which is somewhat related to the tax base question, but it's still an important issue. We don't want this to lay, as it is presently in the case of a caretaker, forever. This needs to go back to normal ownership of real estate, like everything else. Now, I got here just in time to hear Gary say some things about funding. Really, we have 2 points that we need for the citizens of this city to focus on at this point. The first point is we need to keep pressure on the EPA so they will in fact choose the total removal option. That's basic. The second thing is that we need to press the EPA to get started. The fact is, we've got $50 million that we could actually get started cleaning up a large part of this site. And until we get the decision, it's doing no good. So the pressure needs to be, make the choice, make the right choice, and get on with fixing it. Thanks. Commissioner is next.
Well, it's great to see so many people here tonight. Because the only thing that has stopped this from being already decided that they're just going to put a cover over the top is you. People sitting out here tonight. I remember when we had our first meeting over at Goodwill, about a month and a half, 2 months ago. And on about 3 days' notice, we had about 135 people in the room. And we strategized that night what we were going to do. And our strategy was to put pressure on our representatives in Washington, so they would put pressure on the EPA, and to put our own pressure on the EPA by organizing and doing as many visible things as we can. And both those things worked. We've had great support here from Congressman Upton. Lynn Turner's been in all our meetings, and we have had now a joint letter from Congressman Upton, Senator Levin, Senator Stabenow, calling for the complete removal of the PCBs from there, which was a tremendous victory. It was a victory of the people. The people did that. And when shortly after we got the word that EPA was going to send what was in effect pretty much their final decision to just cover it, I was involved, Bruce and I and the mayor and some others were involved in a teleconference with the EPA back in Chicago. And they weren't bending too much. But as Bruce is saying now, they're telling us total removal is back on the agenda. So we haven't won yet. So the point is, when people stand up for each other, when we come together, we can win. We haven't won this yet, but we're well on our way. And we're here tonight because we're going to follow this thing through to the end. We're going to get all those things out of there. And it's going to be a total victory for the people. So I congratulate you. I congratulate you. This is democracy at work. This is what it means to be a citizen. that we say our people deserve better. Our people shouldn't live with a bunch of poison at their back door. The biggest neighborhood in our city should not have poison in the middle of it. We won't stand for that. We're going to fight for it, and we're going to win. Thank you so much.
So, thanks very much, Don. I understand that next up is the facility go-round. Jeremy Orr is going to tell us how to do that.
Questions first.
Oh, sorry, okay. Questions, sorry. All right. Are there any questions for the panel? Any questions that people would like to raise about the issue? Do we have a portable mic to go on? Okay.
Steve Karen, all that in the city. Is there any precedence for this? I don't know what exactly AOC is, but have they had solutions like this in other AOCs smack in the middle of a 4-million-person county? It just doesn't make sense that they would come to that conclusion. I understand the money, but are there other precedents that you know of where that's the way they solve it? In the middle of a major metropolitan area?
Yes and no. AOC is an area of concern. It's a separate program essentially because not every area of concern is a Superfund site. A Superfund site is designated as on the national priorities list. Things have to be really bad essentially if it's on the Superfund list, right? On the area of concern, they have.
I assume it's even worse. It's a Superfund site and an area.
Right. You can say that, right? So I used to tell people that the good news is it's a Superfund site, and the bad news is it's a Superfund site. You know, because now you're dealing with the federal government, the EPA. What's the thing? I work for the government, and I'm here to help. So that's what you're dealing with. The other thing about the bad news about a Superfund site in terms of getting stuff done is that the circular process, the Superfund process, is a three-ring binder that it takes 2 boys and a man to carry. A lot of rules and regulations. So the similarities between our site and a lot of other sites are, for instance, if you go to the A site, Rolla Boulevard, just upstream from downtown Kalamazoo, Comstock area, King Paper Mill, right where Business Loop 94 and 96 split up. Not inside the city limits. There's a huge, two huge piles there of paper mill waste. But that's the only similarity. The difference is that, as you mentioned, Steve, this pile happens to be right in the middle of town. That's in the township. Very few people live nearby. There's not 2 elementary schools within a couple of blocks. There's not a senior living complex right on the other side of the fence. It's not in the middle of an otherwise landlocked city that has nowhere else to develop. It's not out there doing much, there's not much of an impact on the tax base like there is here. And it doesn't affect the outcome of the destiny of the city like this site does. So who wants to have, when you Google PCBs, you want Kalamazoo to come up. And conversely, you don't want to Google Kalamazoo and have PCBs come up. So that's the main difference. Yes? Sorry,
Yeah, my name is Mark Lama. I'm a professor at Western, and I was also struck by this AOC designation. And I just wonder how we put pressure on the EPA to tap into that money to tackle this particular issue. Because it seems like that is, in the scheme of having no low-hanging fruit, it seems that would be a good option for us to try and tackle.
Right. Well, there's a number of federal pots of money, if you will. The AOC program was starved for funding for a number of years until the Obama administration and the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. That has been funded at a level of around $300 million for the past, this is the 5th year, I think. So Great Lakes Restoration Initiative federal money, for instance, is what helped initiate the project just on the north side of Elcott. You know, we're talking Portage Creek. The Allied side is south between Cork and Elcott. Just across Elcott on the north side between Elcott and Reed, where many paper mill brick buildings were for all those years, has now been restored. Great Lakes Restoration Initiative money was like $2.3 million, and then leveraged about $4 or $5 million between state and city funds. So now if you drive by on Elcott, as long as you look to the right, you know, driving west, if you look to the right, you see a nice meandering stream with rocks, and you hear the sound of a bubbling brook. And when people ask me what would I like to see at the Allied site, that would be a good start. It's a city brownfield. So you know you're in bad shape when a brownfield is a step up.
Do other people on the panel also maybe have, Bruce, do you have any information on that too?
I think what we're looking for now is trying to figure out a way to put some funding together from a variety of sources. And the area of concern monies are one of those sources. Obviously, if there's $300 million for the entire Great Lakes, it would be difficult to carve out $70 million of that for one site. But to answer your question, I would say we're going to be asking EPA through Representative Upton and Senator Levin Stavenow's office. Are these funds available? How much would be available? Ask some direct questions of the EPA through that vehicle, which we can ask that question, but it's a little bit better if we go through our elected representatives, obviously. But we're looking at a variety of those funding sources to help them put together money that they already have. And that's kind of what, that's part of the process at this point. And Gary's right. I mean, they find money for a lot of other things, so maybe we can help them with this.
Bruce? I'm sorry. I just wanted to ask, are there any other sources of funding aside from the federal government?
That's a good question. I mean, I don't know that I have the answer off the top of my head. Yeah, $20 a month for everybody. As Gary just said. I didn't say that, Gary said that. I think there's a lot of resources that may be available. Is there grant funding, number one? And I don't know if you can apply grant funding to Superfund sites, but are there other ways? Tax increment financing is another option, as Dave mentioned. If we could put some of this property back on the tax rolls, you get dollars back from taxes on that. Now, is that a lot of money right away? No. That's a little bit of money over time, but it's money. So are there various vehicles out there? There are. And I guess that's kind of what we're exploring at this point is there seemed to be this feel we got out of the EPA meeting that if you could get it to a certain dollar value, it would kind of push EPA over the edge. They'd say, okay, we can do this if we can get this close to the money or something. And I don't know what that dollar figure is, but I think we got to be looking at a lot of different options. And if there's grant funding or if there's some ways we can put some of that together, I'm all for it. So.
I've been hearing questions out in the community about the difference between the cleanup plan that EPA was talking about for $300 million and the one with the environmental EQ that's $120. Are the work plans comparable? How do they differ?
I'll try to answer that, and I'm not quite sure I'll get all the way there, but I'll get most of the way, I think. First of all, there's, within EQ's price, there's an assumption that they're going to be kind of in control of the entire process, which helps them control some of the costs. So that's some of the differential. Another piece that shocked us was there's 20% contingency in the EPA's estimate. 20% of $300 million is $60 million. So that's a pretty big difference. The other thing that we encountered is when EPA goes out and gets a price or gets a quote on a cleanup, they're getting the a la carte price. In other words, it's like going to the restaurant and ordering a soup off the menu and a sandwich off the menu. You pay a price, but if you get the soup and sandwich special, you get a lower price. So when they go out and get these quotes, that's kind of what they're getting. Now, in our meeting with EPA, we could help identify some of those big differential chunks. And they're doing a worst case price when they do it. And I'm not trying to beat them up because they're trying to get a good guess, so to speak, on how much it's going to cost for all these options. And they really don't have much of an option other than to pick up the phone and say, how much are you going to charge me for X, Y, Z? So I think we were able to help them identify that there's some differential costs here. EQ can internalize some costs related to the process. That's why I mentioned that if we could do a sole source purchase or agreement with EQ and EPA with the city, that would be a good thing. And they're understanding that the way they price things is definitely worst case. And they know that if they went out and put it out for bid, they're going to get lower prices from people because then all of a sudden they know that they've got guaranteed work. Right now, there's no guarantee. So that's probably the bigger chunks. There's some differential things. We talked a little bit about how much of the cleanup and to what levels, and we talked about some fill, how high do you make it after you pull everything out, how much dirt do you bring back in. There's a lot of variables in that. They're a little hard to guess right now until you actually get into it. And that's something EQ's looking into as well. They're looking at the remedial investigation report, which is one of those binders Gary was talking about. It's massive, and that's going to give them a better idea where some of their costs are too. So, hope that helps.
Is there a timetable to this point? Is there a clock ticking on anything? And I guess if EQ were to get bid, how long would it take to get stuff out of there?
Well, that's a good question. The only timetable we're aware of right now is that EPA said they want to publish the feasibility study soon. Now, I don't know what soon means in EPA talk. I'm guessing 4 to 6 weeks, but they're just going to publish here's the options. They're not going to say what their preferred option is. They're just going to publish the options available, and then they said they're going to do community outreach. I don't know what that means, and that to me would speak to quite a bit of time. So I'm guessing they're probably not going to come out with a decision of what their preferred alternative is, or selected remedy. I think that's the term they use, until I'm guessing late summer. And these are guesses on my part. I have no idea. How long will it take to clean it up? That's a good question. If you got in and you could hog and haul 3 trucks a truck every 3 minutes, and you could work 10 to 11 months out of the year, you could probably do it in 2 to 3 years, which is still a long time. But if you could do it slowly and your funding came a little slowly, it might take 5 years, 7 years. So, and you'd have less truck traffic, but it would take longer and all those things. But those are just some of the estimates at this point.
Last question.
In the back.
I think I know the answer to the question, but it's worth asking anyway. We've been working on this now for 6 weeks, over a month, I know. Has there been any offer of assistance, if not money, from the state of Michigan, from the governor's office? Have they been involved in this process at all?
Not directly. I think the key thing to note there is this is not a state lead site. In other words, this is a federally led site. EPA is responsible for this. It's not the state of Michigan. So that kind of lets the state off the hook. a little bit, but we have had discussions with state representatives. They're aware of what's going on. We've been trying, Mike has met with Great Lakes Commission, John Allen, who is in the governor's office. He reports to the governor. And we've had some discussions with staff. Governor Snyder's very much you got to work through the process to get to me type of guy. I guess that's okay. But we know his office is aware of the issue. There's been no offer of money, and I don't anticipate that from the state, but Gary's got a comment.
I got a call from, I forgot the name of the person, but he was like the number 2 guy, I think, at Michigan Department of Environmental Quality at the office the other day. And he said, Gary, I'm responding to an email you sent to Governor Snyder. Well, I didn't actually personally send an email to Governor Snyder. What it was, he was responding to the online petition that's in the handout. It goes to Governor Snyder as well as to our federal representatives in Washington, D.C., and it goes to the EPA. So really what he was responding to is that petition. It was online. They didn't tell him that, apparently. They said, well, this guy in Kalamazoo sent this email. So, but anyway, it gave me a chance to talk a little bit to somebody at DEQ. And as Bruce said, no offers of money, no offers of, well, why don't you come to Lansing and we'll talk about it. And basically, again, 2 things going on. Our allied site and the whole Kalamazoo River Superfund site is a federal lead site. It used to be that DEQ was the lead a number of years ago. And my understanding that I asked that guy from DEQ, why is it that it's a federal lead now instead of DEQ, your department that was the lead? And he had been there long enough to remember when the DEQ was the lead on the Superfund plan. And his answer was that the responsible parties didn't think that any agreement that was written with the state of Michigan would hold enough water, if you will, and indemnify them enough to make those negotiations worthwhile. They wanted the federal government to come in and give their blessing at the end of their cleanup to exonerate them from any future liability for the site. So that was his explanation why it is a federal lead site now. And one other comment about DEQ. They're the people that are in the little John boat every once in a while going down Portage Creek doing testing. They're the ones who, 3 years ago now it is, found PCB contamination in the sediments along Portage Creek. They're the ones who essentially caused the EPA to declare time-critical removal action and spend $16 million that they found to clean up the sediments of PCB contamination all along Portage Creek from Reed Street out to the confluence of the river. 4-year project, $16 million. Talking with the project manager there during a tour last year, he said they were finding more than what they thought. They had to dig a little bit deeper. It was going to take a little bit longer and cost a little bit more, perhaps, than their original $16 million estimate. So, not to give the DEQ a get-out-of-jail-free card or anything, but they have been really, as far as I'm concerned, they've been taking care and watching out for our interests here. All right, so that was the last question according to Meredith, right? So we're going to get into the more interactive part of this evening. It's line dancing, and we'll form over. We have facilitated round robin, and Jerry Curran is going to talk.
Jeremy, or is going to introduce us?
Or, sorry.
I don't think we'll be doing any line dancing today. I didn't get my line dancing shoes, but my name is Jeremy Orr. I'm a community organizer with Isaac here in Kalamazoo. Work on a number of different issues, but we actually worked on this issue back in 2007 tirelessly. So when the time came again this year to dive in, we committed to work on the issue as well with a number of different partners and all of you in this room. But I think for me, I actually found out about the issue before Isaac had came on board this year. And we contacted Don Cooney, and he put me in touch with Meredith, and I told her I wanted to get involved at the very least in a personal capacity, and for some odd reason, spend some of my free time helping organize around some of the issues. And for me, you know, it was for a personal reason. I don't think I've shared this with you at all either, but back before I moved here to Kalamazoo, I worked for a small community development corporation in Detroit. We did commercial residential redevelopment, mostly houses and rehabbing. But one of our prized possessions, one of the main things we did, we had this community garden and a kind of a farmer's market right in the middle of our neighborhood. You know, in the midst of a city that's struggling, that was a really bright spot for us. So as we realized how good that community garden was going and how that farmer's market was going, we told ourselves, we devised this plan to acquire more land within our community, about a 2-mile radius, to set up an urban farm and to do some more, set up some more community gardens in that area. And, we looked at the numbers, and it was shown that houses and property anywhere within a quarter mile of a community garden or urban farm, the property value is raised, right? And we know what a garden can do for a community socially, and let alone in a food desert like Detroit. We knew what that fresh produce meant to the members of that community. So we finally get this plan together. We acquire this land, and we're all ready to go. And we find out that all of this vacant land that we were about to use wasn't usable. Like, what did you call it? A kitty litter? We had a kitty litter situation in Detroit. For the past 10 to 20 years, the city of Detroit, with their blight issue, they had been bulldozing houses, right? And everybody was happy to get these blighted houses bulldozed, but they were actually covering up the houses, covering up the debris with more dirt. So we're talking houses that have been there for 50, 60, 70 years, painted with lead, left all the land in our community pretty much unusable, right? It would cost more to purify that soil than it would have, than what we paid for the land, right? And that's a fight that we weren't prepared to take on. Right? Our community wasn't organized. And so for me, being here now, right, being here in Kalamazoo and seeing an organized community, and having been here before, I knew I didn't want to let this opportunity pass, get involved, and lend myself to help out. So that's kind of my story. So having been here before, I'm familiar with it. And I know on behalf of Isaac and myself, I want to fight as much as I can to help you out with this issue. So we're going to do the fun part, the facilitated go around. So we talked about some different ideas and decided that instead of breaking up into small groups and going out into rooms and never seeing you all again, we decided we would do this thing where we post questions right on the wall. So if you look around the room, there's a section A, a section B, C, and D over there. So what your facilitators, you're going to have a facilitator in each section. What that facilitator is going to do is ask you a series of questions which should be on your agenda as well. And you're going to respond to those questions. And as you respond, we're not trying to build consensus, right? But what we're trying to do is get some ideas. As we talk about community engagement, is so important, right? We talk about this is, democracy, right? And democracy looks like this when we have the whole community giving their input and making decisions. So at each section, we want everybody to get engaged, get involved, and we're going to actually write down your suggestions and comments or even questions on all those, blank flip chart paper right there. So probably the best way to do it, let's say, we'll split up into 4 groups. Let's say the first 2 tables here go there. The first 2 tables and kind of the people around that area go to that corner. These 2 tables come to this, and then the final 2 go to that corner. That helps. And so what you'll do, you'll be asked questions, you'll be timed. And the main thing to keep in mind is that, so you'll get a chance to go to each section. After about 4 minutes, you'll hear you didn't bring your kitchen time.
I'll tell you.
So she's going to tell you when time is up, and you're just going to rotate